I found out my fiancée was only marrying me for green card and planned to leave me after. So I exposed her and cut her off. I 35M, about a year ago, I met my fiancée, a 29-year-old woman originally from another country. I'll call her fiancée here because that's what she was supposed to be, although now that title leaves a bitter taste in my mouth. We met when she accompanied a mutual acquaintance to get his car fixed at my shop. She was friendly, open, and charming in a way I hadn't experienced before. We struck up a conversation that day, and it led to a series of casual dinners and trips around town. At first, everything felt incredibly refreshing. She was eager to learn about my culture, curious about my daily life, and seemed genuinely supportive of my ambitions. I've never been the flashy type. I don't have a big house or a fancy car, and I'm certainly not rolling in money. I keep my day-to-day routine simple. I wake up, head to the shop, work until close, and then I spend evenings with friends or at home watching old basketball games. She seemed to appreciate that low-key vibe, which made me drop my guard. My mother was the first person to hint that something felt off. One weekend, I brought my fiancée to a small family barbecue. We were standing by the grill, and my mother leaned over, whispering that my fiancée asked her a series of odd questions about my citizenship status and how quickly we could get married in the United States. Mother brushed it off as casual curiosity, but it stuck with me. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself that my fiancée was just worried about the immigration process. After all, she was open about the fact that her time in the country might depend on a proper visa or sponsorship if we got serious. A few months after we started dating, my fiancée suggested we move in together. I was hesitant. I take commitment seriously, and merging households is a pretty big step. But she was persistent. She said it would help us get comfortable living as a couple and show immigration authorities we were genuinely together. At the time, I didn't see any immediate red flags in that logic, so I agreed. We found a small apartment close to my shop. It was convenient for me to drop by during the day, and she seemed happy to decorate the place from scratch. The first real jolt came the day she proposed getting legally engaged. I've been thinking about it, but her timing felt rushed. We hadn't known each other all that long, yet she framed it like it was a natural next step. She even printed out forms related to the fiancé visa process, showing me how we could streamline her paperwork. She said if we were engaged, she could adjust her status in the country after we got married. I was flattered she wanted to be official, but a small voice in the back of my mind warned me to slow down. I ignored it and went ahead with a plan. She was so enthusiastic, I figured we discovered real love at a fast pace. Sometimes that happens, right? Everything escalated further when I introduced her to my father. He's a straightforward man who rarely minces words. I mentioned our engagement, and he congratulated us politely. But later, he told me he found it odd how quickly she steered every conversation to wedding dates, officiants, and the legal paperwork behind marriages in the U.S. Father cautioned me to ensure I knew her well enough before tying knot. I appreciated his concern, but I still believed she was just detail-oriented. By the time we'd set a wedding date, a sense of unease had started to settle in. Every single part of planning revolved around how soon we could finalize everything. She insisted on minimal guests and a simple ceremony, which I would normally prefer too, but she was less excited about the emotional aspect and more concerned about the documents. It was as if she viewed marriage as a transaction, which left me with a nagging feeling I couldn't fully articulate. Several weeks before the wedding, my fiancé's behavior grew more intense. She pressed me to schedule the courthouse appointment as soon as possible, brushing aside any mention of planning a honeymoon or even a celebration with close friends. Each time I tried to bring up sentimental details, like picking our favorite music for the ceremony, she grew frustrated, almost irritated, and told me I was wasting time. That's when the red flags began to wave in earnest. One night, she confronted me in the living room, complaining that our wedding date was set too far away. She argued that every day we delayed was dangerous for her immigration status. I told her I'd do what I could to help, but I also made it clear I wasn't comfortable rushing this life-altering commitment just for paperwork. She gave me a cold look and said, "If you love me, you'll do what needs to be done." It felt manipulative. Nobody had ever spoken to me like that, but I tried to chalk it up to stress. After all, she was in a different country, away from her family, likely worried about her future. So I tried to be understanding, despite feeling uneasy. I started noticing she was taking phone calls in hushed tones. She'd step out of the apartment or go into the bedroom and close the door. If I asked who she was talking to, she'd say it was her mother or some relative back home. Normally, that wouldn't be suspicious, but the secretive tone raised questions in my mind. I began to wonder if she was hiding something. Then, by sheer coincidence, I discovered a clue that tore the veil from my eyes. A friend of mine, someone who had first introduced me to her, stopped by my shop. He's not particularly close to her, but he has a wide social circle. He mentioned he'd heard a rumor that she was openly telling a few people about her plans to remain in the U.S. after obtaining her green card through marriage, then separate from me as soon as she could. My friend said he didn't believe it initially, but the chatter was persistent. He felt compelled to warn me that something might be amiss. I was stunned. My initial reaction was denial. I couldn't accept that this woman I'd grown to care about might be so calculating. Yet the red flags I've been collecting in my head started connecting like puzzle pieces. The relentless push for a quick marriage, her lack of interest in any deeper emotional or social ties, the suspicious phone calls. Suddenly, it all aligned too well. But I needed more than rumors. If this was true, I wanted to hear it from her own mouth or see it in writing. That opportunity arose sooner than expected. A couple of days later, she left her laptop open in the living room while she made a quick grocery run. She was notorious for not locking her screen. I wasn't proud of snooping, but I was desperate to know what she was up to. Clicking through her social media chats, I found a conversation between her and a friend back home. My fiancé wrote in plain language that the wedding was just a practical step to secure permanent residency. The plan, as she described it, was to wait for the green card to arrive, then file for divorce once her status was solid. She even joked about how gullible I was. My stomach twisted with shock and anger, but I kept reading. She seemed to be bragging about how she played the loving partner so convincingly. She described me as nice but clueless, referencing how easy it had been to push me into an engagement. She also bragged about how quickly she'd get her paperwork done. When I finished reading, I felt a surge of anger like never before. The person I trusted to share my life with had been using me like a stepping stone, waiting to discard me when I was no longer beneficial. Determined to confront her, I didn't smash the laptop or leave angry messages. Instead, I wanted to plan my response carefully. There was a real risk she'd try to twist the situation or even fabricate stories about me if I wasn't careful. After some research, I found out that if she proved the marriage was legitimate on paper, she could gain a conditional green card. Then, if she claimed abuse or extreme hardship, she might be able to stay without my cooperation. It was a scary thought. That evening, she walked through the front door with grocery bags, and I greeted her calmly. I made small talk, offered to help her unpack, and pretended everything was normal. Inside, I was fuming, but I knew a direct confrontation without proof in hand could lead to denial and excuses. I wanted a confession that left no room for reinterpretation. So I hatched a plan. I set up my phone to record audio and asked her to sit down for a serious talk. I started by saying I'd noticed her frustration about the wedding date. Then I pretended I was ready to accelerate the process. Her eyes lit up, and she started talking about how we could expedite the paperwork. She repeated that we didn't need a big wedding, just a quick ceremony. She leaned in, almost as if to gauge my reaction. I played along, giving her just enough rope, waiting for her to confirm in her own words that this was all a green card ploy. Sure enough, she spilled the details. She said that once she had her documentation, she planned to travel back and forth freely to see her family. But what stunned me most was how she never even mentioned a life together beyond the immigration papers. She only cared about how soon she could legally stay in the country, and then how she'd have more options if our relationship didn't work out. I asked, "So what if we don't work out?" And her answer cut deep. She shrugged and said, "Then I'll do what I have to do." I pressed her a bit more, asking if she'd really stay if we had problems. She hesitated, then mumbled something along the lines of, "It's important for me to secure my future." She never said the words, "I'll leave you right after," but it was painfully clear her commitment to me was conditional on her immigration status. At that moment, I stopped the recording and let my anger rise. I told her I knew exactly what she was planning. I mentioned I'd seen her conversation on her laptop. She froze, looking equal parts terrified and enraged. Then came the defensive onslaught. She accused me of invading her privacy, rummaging through her personal chats, and betraying her trust. She even threw out a wild claim that I had twisted her words. The hypocrisy was staggering. When she realized her deflections weren't working, she turned to emotional manipulation. She said that if I truly loved her, I'd understand how difficult it was for her to stay in the U.S. She tried to paint herself as a victim, claiming the immigration process was unfair and she was just doing what was necessary to remain with me. But I'd seen enough to know that wasn't the real story. She escalated further, threatening that if I ruined her plans, she'd tell authorities I coerced her into marriage for my own gain. She snarled that she could claim I was trying to control her. She even threatened to spread lies in my community, maybe call my landlord or slander me to my customers. My blood was boiling, but I stayed composed. I had my evidence, and I planned to use it if necessary. I told her calmly that the wedding was off. I was ending the engagement, and I wanted her to move out of the apartment immediately. I said if she tried any of her dirty tricks, I'd have no choice but to present the recorded conversation and her chat logs to the proper authorities, including immigration services. She went pale, and for a moment, she seemed unsure how to respond. She tried to claim she could stay by filing for a protective order, or that she might get around my refusal by finding someone else quickly. I shrugged and told her good luck with that. She wouldn't get anywhere by lying about me. She lashed out, shouting that I was heartless, that I had no empathy for her struggles. In reality, she showed no empathy for me in her scheming. After that explosive confrontation, I handed her a short timeline to pack up her things and leave. I also contacted a lawyer the next morning to clarify any legal issues regarding our broken engagement. The attorney advised me to keep any evidence of her fraudulent intentions just in case she tried to retaliate. It was a stressful time. She was still in the apartment, but her entire demeanor shifted. She was furious and tried every tactic to stay. She said if I kicked her out, she'd have nowhere else to go, and threatened to smear my reputation. I stood firm and told her I wasn't backing down. Eventually, she left the apartment in a huff, hauling her suitcases out to a waiting car. I believe one of her acquaintances gave her a ride, and I overheard her complaining in her native language, probably calling me every name under the sun. But I was beyond caring. After she drove off, I took a long breath. There was no relief yet, because I didn't trust she just vanished quietly. My instincts were correct. A few days later, I got a call from a relative of hers who lived in the U.S. That person accused me of abandoning her and demanded that I provide monetary support. I refused, stating she and I were never married and that she was free to make her own living arrangements. That relative tried to guilt-trip me, claiming I was trying to destroy her life. I calmly explained the entire situation, that I had evidence she was using me for a green card. The line went silent, and then they ended the call abruptly. Over the next few days, I took additional steps to protect myself. I changed the locks on the apartment. The landlord helped facilitate it. Given that the lease was in my name, I informed my closest friends and family about the situation so they wouldn't be blindsided if she reached out to them. I also reached out to immigration authorities in a proactive move. While I wasn't required to submit anything, I wanted a record that I had concerns about potential marriage fraud. My lawyer suggested I keep those documents on file, just in case. If she tried to claim we'd been married or that I mistreated her, I would have a paper trail. It felt extreme, but I'd rather be safe than regretful. The final blow to her plans, as far as I can piece together, came when she realized I had actual proof. A friend of mine mentioned spotting her leaving town, headed to a city a few hours away. She tried to contact me one last time, sending me a long message about how I'd ruined her life and that I didn't understand how dire her situation was. She demanded I send her money or else she'd tell everyone I was abusive. I sent her a curt response that if she persisted, I'd forward her messages and our recorded conversation to the authorities. After that, she went silent. The sense of satisfaction I felt was overwhelming. Not because I enjoy hurting anyone, but because I refused to be played. She manipulated me, lied to my face, and planned to ditch me as soon as her status was secure. By exposing her, I made sure she faced the consequences of those manipulative actions. I don't know her current circumstances, but I do know she won't be using me as her stepping stone anymore. In the aftermath, I took time to reflect on how easily I fell for her act. I saw only her charming side while ignoring glaring signs. It's been a humbling lesson in trusting my instincts and not rushing something as important as marriage. People often talk about how genuine love requires vulnerability, and that's true, but it also requires wisdom. I realize it's crucial to protect oneself from those who prey on trust for personal gain. Looking back, I'm grateful to my family and friends who pointed out oddities and kept me grounded when my judgment was clouded. I've learned to trust my gut and pay attention to inconsistencies. Though the experience was painful and left me on edge for a while, I ultimately walked away stronger, with my integrity intact. If there's any lesson to share, it's that genuine love doesn't come with manipulative ultimatums. Sometimes, walking away from a toxic situation is the best form of self-care and the most satisfying revenge.